Today, Sigma has announced two new prime lenses for Sony mirrorless cameras, the Sigma 20mm f1.4 DGDN and the Sigma 24mm f1.4 DGDN. In this video, I'll be comparing the new 20mm to the old version to see whether this new release is a worthy successor. However, I've also released a video comparing the new 24mm to the old version too, which you can view by clicking up here or by using the link down in the description below. But anyway, on to the test. This new lens has been designed from the ground up specifically for mirrorless cameras, unlike the old version which was originally designed for DSLRs and then backwards engineered to fit on newer mirrorless cameras. As a result, this new lens is way smaller and lighter than the old one, around 40% lighter in fact, and it has a few new features to boot that just make the whole thing feel much more suited to a modern Sony camera. As you'd expect, this new lens has the same high quality metal and composite plastic build as the old lens, and it features a proper dust and splash proof construction complete with rubber O-ring around the lens mount. Now, some of you may have even noticed that this new lens includes a slot for rear mounted filters too, whilst the old one doesn't. It's also worth mentioning that this new lens doesn't have a bulbous front element like the old one does, which means that it can now accept screw-on filters, whereas the old one obviously couldn't. In terms of features, the old lens includes a manual MF to AF switch and a focus indicator window. On the new model, Sigma have kept the MF to AF switch, but they've removed the focus window in favour of a customizable AF lock button and also a manual focus lock switch. This new switch allows you to deactivate the manual focus dial to prevent you from accidentally shifting focus, which is pretty handy. Oh yeah, and there's also a lockable and declickable manual aperture dial, as if there wasn't enough dials and switches to spoil you with. Both lenses are nice and responsive when focusing manually with no noticeable lag or delay, which is good news. Though one noticeable difference between these two lenses is that the new lens has a much longer throw than the old one. But in truth, it really wasn't so long that I found it to be an issue when performing focus pulls. So when handing out points, for me, both of these lenses deserve a point for build, as they're both really nicely made. However, the combination of this new lens being smaller, lighter, and including a generous array of features just makes it much nicer to shoot with, and so it wins the point for handling. In terms of price, at launch this new lens will actually be around the same price as the existing model, which is pretty impressive considering the larger array of features it includes. And so for that reason, I've got to give the new lens the point here, as clearly it's the better value for money option. When it comes to autofocus in good lighting conditions, both of these lenses are rapid to focus, so the new lens is definitely snappier than the old one, and it locks onto targets in a heartbeat. In low light conditions, neither lens showed any signs of hunting, and the new lens in particular seemed completely unfazed by the significant drop in light and continued to lock on quickly and accurately. When shooting wide open in continuous burst mode, almost all of the shots I took with these two lenses were sharp and in focus, so a pretty impressive performance across the board. And this means it's points all round for AF in photo mode. Switching over to video mode, and when tracking George as he walked towards the camera and shooting wide open at f1.4, I'll be honest, it was a pretty poor performance from both of these lenses, as they both struggled to keep up after numerous attempts. When repeating the test at a faster pace, things just got worse. Now, in all fairness, this is a pre-production copy of the new 20mm lens that I am testing, and when I did mention this performance issue to Sigma UK, they did reassure me that there's often a final firmware update before the lens is officially released, so let's just hope that this is something that gets fixed. For the old lens though, there really is no excuse. The good news is that both of these lenses are pretty quiet when it comes to AF noise. Both of these lenses suffer from focus breathing, though due to the bulbous front element on the old 20mm, the breathing has a weird warping effect to it, which is interesting. So, with a less than perfect round for these lenses, unfortunately neither option deserves a point in this round for video AF. In our Bokeh Balls test, both lenses created slightly lemon-shaped orbs at the centre, which get even more lemon-like as they get closer to the edges of the frame. It's also worth noting that the old lens features a distinct onion ring effect, whilst the orbs created by the new lens feature haloing instead. instead. In terms of general bokeh quality, both lenses produce a nice thick blur thanks to their super wide maximum apertures of f1.4. However, if you look closely, you can see that the onion ring effect on the old lens does make the bokeh appear slightly more textured, and there's even a touch of amber fringing. However, I think it's fair to say that both lenses offer a nice bokeh quality, and therefore both lenses do deserve a point apiece. In our lens flare test, the new lens does a much better job of protecting against ghosting compared to the old lens, most likely down to the fact that Sigma have done away with the bulbous front element. The new lens also benefits from having a removable lens hood, whilst the lens hood on the old lens is fixed in place, which further adds to the overall size of the lens. On a longitudinal chromatic aberration test, the new lens offers a vast improvement over the old lens, with only a touch of teal fringing at the top and no coloration at the bottom. The old glass, on the other hand, displays prominent yellow and blue fringing across the entirety of the chart. Out in the real world, I've got to admit, the significant reduction in size and weight makes the newer lens way more comfortable to shoot with for long periods of time, compared to the old one, which feels very bulky and front heavy in comparison. Ultimately though, when it comes down to image quality, both of these lenses are capable of producing beautiful looking images with bags of detail and clarity, even when shooting wide open at f1.4. Although the 20mm focal length certainly isn't considered a conventional portrait lens, when shooting in central London, this wide angle allowed me to pack in more of the surroundings into the frame, which was a nice change rather than it all just being about the model. Sorry, Georgia. And so long as I didn't shoot super close to Georgia, the distortion was pretty minimal. Though that said, you could always decide to break the rules and use distortion creatively to achieve an edgy feel to your images, which works particularly well in urban environments. Now, keeping on the topic of distortion, both of these lenses suffer from barrel distortion, which is kind of to be expected. Though the good news is that this should be a one-click fix once the lens correction profiles are updated for this new lens in Lightroom and Photoshop. In terms of sharpness, when shooting wide open at f1.4, the new lens is noticeably sharper than the old one, with the old lens even displaying a touch of coloured fringing. At the corners though, this time the old lens offers the sharper result despite showing more traces of coloured fringing. When shooting up close at the lens's minimum focusing distance, the newer lens again offers a significant improvement in sharpness and has no coloured fringing, unlike the old lens. So when it comes to awarding points for image quality, for me, the new 20mm is a clear improvement over the old lens, and so it wins the final point. Somewhat unsurprisingly, the new lens wins this head-to-head test. Wow, big surprise. But does this mean that it's now time to sell off your old 20mm in favour of this new one? I almost certainly would, because this new lens is a clear improvement over the old design, mainly due to it offering superior image quality in a smaller and lighter body with a few more modern features to boot.